Clovis Bray. The man was everywhere, it seems. During your adventures, Guardians, between the gunfights and loot chests, you may have seen the name, the insignia, maybe even used the technology. But like the hierarchy of the Hive, the more you dig into Clovis Bray's history, the more you find. Even now, as reports arise concerning Europa, a rather recently unexplored moon of Jupiter, the name Clovis Bray has arisen. What was he doing there? What can we expect to find? Welcome back, Guardians, to another Embrace Destiny video. Kaz PhD here. Last time we discussed the interdiction of Europa, the travel ban established by the Vanguard on Europa, and a recent communique I've received from the Exos stranger. Today's report begins an exploration of decrypted logs given to us by the stranger, detailing Clovis Bray's work on Europa. Despite their age, the logs are well maintained, with both typescript and notes scrawled in between. Diagrams, blueprints, formulas, and coded images intersperse the 9 journal entries. Reading through is like a descent into madness, from a somewhat reasonable perspective to the truly obscure and, frankly, terrible. If it weren't someone's journals, it would simply read as well-written science fiction, following a scientist's fanatical search for immortality, taking him far beyond both our physical and philosophical limits. But, since these are supposedly the living logs of the famous, or rather infamous, Clovis Bray, the results, the journey, are even more foreboding. Suffice it to say, you've been warned. Entry 1. The Arrival. The first entry details Bray's arrival to Europa, and establishes his research station. Traveling aboard the Hanu 2 spacecraft, Clovis Bray's official mission was to construct a long-term colony to study for indigenous life on Europa. However, Bray makes both his intention and personality very clear early on, calling the mission, quote, the most expensive lie in human history, end quote. While he does intend to map Europa's life, his main purpose on the moon was to seek the secret of immortality through a process he calls clarity. See, Clovis Bray was dying, and had been for some time. Arguably, many of the projects he so feverishly pursued, the technological marvels he created, were all in the pursuit of immortality. Civatech, exoscience, experiments on the Vex, all of it, not for any altruistic benefits to humankind, but for his own survival, and the survival of his way of thinking. Important to note that this mission follows the discovery of the K1 artifact on Luna. We have not covered it in some time, Guardians, but prior to the events of Shadowkeep, Eris Morn entrusted us with a journal, similar to this, detailing the early research performed on the moon during the Golden Age. There, a team of scientists discovered an artifact, which they called K1, which seemed to act as a transceiver, with power and energy readings like the Traveler. Clovis Bray funded and supported the mission, but things went very wrong very quickly. The artifact had severe psychological effects on the researchers, from paranoia to visions, and eventually Bray actually covered the whole thing up. In fact, for those Crucible enthusiasts out there, the anomaly map is actually the site of the K1 artifact discovery, and the facility in the center is a Bray isolation chamber, preventing contact between it and the outside. Importantly, as the events of Shadowkeep unfolded, we learned that the artifact, the Seed, was apparently a way to connect with the darkness, to hear its messages, and Eris has been working on deciphering its messages ever since. According to Bray, the K1 artifact promised him a, quote, gateway to the secret of immortality, end quote, waiting on Europa. So, with his Hanu spacecraft carrying 8 habitats, 600 shielded robotic frames, backup replication chambers, hazardous environment engineers, and Eon-type platforms for radar, LiDAR, and deep ice monitoring, Bray set his course on the lonely Jovian moon. The entry concludes with both an examination of the dangers of the oceanic depths of Europa and Clovis's ongoing projects, including projects on the Exomind, Clarity, being a good man and grandfather, and becoming the LUCA of future human thought. All of which were in process and will be discussed here later. In Entry 2, settled on Europa, Bray's frames begin construction of the station. External radiation was so bad the frames had to be reset and repaired often. Here, we learn a lot about Clovis Bray's motivation, his philosophy, and his goals. For those a little rusty in the study of metaphysics, we're going to take this one step at a time. First, to settle something that had proven confusing, Clovis Bray had a son, Clovis Bray Jr., or, as he is called here, Clovis II. We'll discuss the Bray family more fully, but it is important to point out, especially as distinctions and definitions are often difficult to come by in our pursuit of answers in the lore. Clovis Bray Sr. had a philosophy, a book entitled Competitive Immortality through Primogeniture of Future Human Ontogeny, Raphanology, or PFHOR for short. And you thought debating with Asher Mir was a pain. Breaking it down, the text can be roughly simplified to competitive immortality through the study of the firstborn's life, death, and evolutionary development. Or, as Clovis II put it, most of our energy should be spent in support of the things that are most like us. Or, the best way to spend energy is on things that make more things like us. See, here, the firstborn is not the eldest son in a family, but rather the first ancestor in a long line. While ancestry and legacy have been very important to many families and movements throughout history, the Brays take it a step further. Essentially, they wish to maintain their own immortality, not only literally, but by ensuring that everyone who comes after them draws inspiration from the Bray family. As Clovis Sr. said, "Children are viron replicators of our ideas, but there is a certain terror about them. The terror is change. Clovis wants to live forever and have his thoughts, his intention and approach to life to not only live forever, but be the guiding approach by which the rest of humanity conducts itself." He wished to become the LUCA, the last universal common ancestor of all human thought, and he was willing to do just about anything to achieve it. Clovis Sr. replaced his son's mitochondrial DNA, normally inherited from the mother, with his own, to make his son more like him, and he had been developing exotech to reach his earlier goal. Scrawled throughout this entry are discussions on the problem of exominds. At this stage, an exomind was not much more than an advanced frame. There were problems with the technology. People could not be transferred properly into a synthetic frame, and if it was attempted, a catastrophic process followed. When Clovis II became ill, Bray Sr. did everything he could to save him. Unfortunately, the body was failing, and Clovis attempted to save his mind. Unfortunately, at this time, the only way to achieve 100% fidelity, to make a perfect copy, was in a process which destroyed the original. A quantum snapshot, it was called. Ultimately left Clovis II's mind apparently perfectly copied, but unable to occupy a synthetic body, owing to exominds crashing and rejecting the exo frame. Bray believed he lacked the alkahest, the universal solvent which could fix this process and allow for the transformation. Finally, the entry details an encounter with actual Europan life. Described as a bristling thing, large as a whale, it appeared to have a central core and numerous tentacled limbs. These moved back and forth slowly, drawing its prey in both by its movement and the plankton which had built up on its exterior. If damaged or threatened, the life form would literally tear itself apart, limbs scattering everywhere to possibly recombine later. Bray absolutely despised the creature, but it's very interesting to hear more about Europan life. If we ever go, will we encounter creatures such as these? And what if it's prey? The Golden Age scientist and visionary Clovis Bray is responsible for many things. His company and research have lived on, even through the Dark Age, and all we have more recently faced. However, the man himself had some very startling ideas. Call it confidence or arrogance, Clovis Bray believed that his way of thinking was not only important, but the only way humanity should conduct itself. So much so that Bray was aiming for immortality at any cost. He genetically manipulated his son, Clovis II, and in trying to perfect the Exo mind, destroyed Clovis Jr.'s body by copying his mind on a quantum level. Disturbingly obsessed, Bray did not stop there, and the story continues, darkly. However, that, I'm afraid, is where we will have to leave the entry for today. I'm currently guiding Guardians through the old tower, searching for any lost Siva tech, and we need full radio comms to navigate the maze, Wall, and Trevor. Ugh, Trevor. In any case, I hope you found this report interesting. Knowledge is power, Guardians, and if the rumors concerning Europa continue, it will only be a matter of time before we find ourselves there searching for answers. Should you wish to hear more, be sure to set your alerts so your ghosts can notify you of my next report. As always, be safe, be kind, and I'll see you all next time, Guardians. Bye now.